Welcome aboard, traders, to a new session. Today, special edition only for cryptocurrencies. Is crypto the future of finance? 10 years ago, this is basically what got me into crypto. I did not know anything about cryptocurrencies, let alone Bitcoin. Even though I heard before, but never got into what it is, what it was, and how it actually works. As I mentioned before, 10 years ago, this is exactly what got me into BTC. Basically, in 2015, around March of that year, a book from Mr. I can't remember the name, Edward Griffin. There we go. Mr. Edward Griffin wrote a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Basically, how the Fed started back then. From a trip that started on a train heading to Georgia, Jekyll Island, supposedly with a few politicians among some bankers. This is where the Fed started to benefit, in his concept, a few elites within the banking system. Of course, digging more into this book, that book basically got me into crypto, into Bitcoin mainly. And of course, since then, it's been a non-stop journey. However, what I've seen over the past 10 years, the future of finance, is basically, apologies, it's basically the same that I observed throughout the years, right? I agree that there is potential in cryptocurrencies, especially on cross-border payments. At the time, XRP was one of my favorite tokens. Continues to be. There is real use case. However, one of the premises within crypto was decentralization. If you guys remember, that was the main promise of cryptocurrencies, removing the middleman. Now, 10 years later, here we are with the middleman involved. Is it really the future of finance? Hard to know. We will see. Anyways, I wanted to start with a comment in crypto because this is basically how I started trading without knowing anything about cryptocurrencies, let alone trading. Okay, it's a very long journey that continues to amaze me. So let's dive into the cryptocurrencies. Here we have a website from a very popular one, CoinMarketCap. We're going to be diving into the main one, of course, potentially the top 10, starting on Bitcoin, Ethereum, not Tether. By the way, XRP used to be the number 3. There were only 4 tokens, major tokens, back in 2012, 15 on Coinbase. If you guys remember, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Litecoin only. And also, yeah, Litecoin was one of the major ones back then. Where are we in the price action? We always start as to where are we currently trading in the price action for Bitcoin. Let's start on the macro, okay, with the main one. Bitcoin, you guys know we are trading still at 107, okay? Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to start also on the macro to the micro is based on the sentiment that we observe at these highs, okay? And this is not to be bearish, bullish, rather comparing the sentiment we're trading now, rather at the early identification patterns of parabolic rises, okay? We are indeed in a parabola. We have been basically since late 2022, early 2023, basically as the indices also started to print the bottoming price action that led us to current highs, okay? And again, this is where, of course, the hype of higher levels come into place, which can always be the case. To start briefly on the daily time frame, we already know we are within a variation of a W formation, which is a shark pattern. For those unfamiliar with harmonic patterns, do not worry. We have all of this information in our Discord room. However, also, this is not my own work. This is a research from Scott Carney, the author of Harmonic Trading Technique, to introduce this pattern to traders, okay? So therefore, this is a shark pattern that we already know that can be a precursor of a bullish 5-0, okay? A correction from the highs or from these lows at 74,000 to the highs, ideally a correction to the 50%, 93,000, or the 0.618 as a key technical level should act as support if there is indeed a correction in the event of a continuation structure, meaning a continuation of the prevailing trend, looking left, market leave clues. Clearly the trend has been upwards, but not only here, my friends. So now let's zoom into the macro. How did we get here at current levels? To start with the chart, let's move back into FTX saga. Who can remember here how we got here to current levels? Why the macro is important? Because this gives us a full picture as to where we are currently trading in the price action for BTC. Okay. Moving into a weekly time frame, 2021 or so. Okay, all of these are within the context of the parabolic rises. Okay, can we go any higher? Absolutely, it's always the case. However, the sentiment is where I would like to focus here now, unlike back then also. In a similar context, 2021, you guys remember FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange, which by the way, I've been using for a long time. I used to like them until of course there were some issues within the exchange and they of course disappear. Okay. When they disappear, they started having trouble at the highs at 69,000 region back then, November of 2021, right here at these highs. Keep in mind, this is only to bring the context from the macro to the micro, okay? The macro picture started on, at least for the last cycle, since FTX, okay? The C point in this context was a 69,000 region. A post from Elon Musk, a meme was posted with a picture, a couple looking at the price action on Bitcoin at 69,000 region, basically at the top. What a coincidence, okay? That was also where we have Brady, I believe the quarterback also in the commercial for the FTX platform, extremely high back then. The sentiment in the same manner at these highs was 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, 1 million, and so on. But you guys remember the end of the story. We went to the lows at 16,000 region. And here is where the major cycle started. In my opinion, this is where, from the macro, I rather focus here on early identification structure for parabolic rises. Basically, a rounding bottom, okay? This is where, in my opinion, to become extremely bullish, these were the levels where I rather focus on the macro for a full long position per se, okay? This doesn't mean that we cannot go any higher, okay? I'm not portraying that argument here, only revisiting the sentiment, once again, from the macro to the current levels, okay? We're going to measure also Fibonacci application to the extensions also to see if the golden ratio from the previous high to the lows is within the range for parabolic rises and how high can we go. Ideally, the 2.618 in some cases is where the parabolic rise culminates or terminate, okay? Ideally, depending on many other macro factors within the overall macro view, including indices, cryptocurrencies, among other trading vehicles. So therefore, FTX saga, we started 69,000, the momentum, plan B, all the other sentiment was extremely high. In fact, let's revisit that same chart, okay? This one was November 15, 2021. Do not worry, my friends. I'm not trying to rub the shoulder here, but only presenting the informations on a macro pattern. Okay. November at the C leg. I remember clearly the sentiment extremely bullish back then. I presented this argument potentially as a case to 16,000 to 14,000 region, a range potentially for a turning point. After nearly a year or so, this one was from November 2021 to November 2022, we indeed achieved those levels. And the sentiment here, once again, was lower. You guys remember $3,000, people were calling for lower levels. However, if we were studying the formations that were developing at these lows, we indeed presented also divergences, meaning a shift in trend after a significant decline from that FTX saga at the hype, 69,000, basically right here, to the 15,000 region. This one, in my opinion, presented a lower risk and higher reward opportunity on the macro. The macro referring to the major time frames, the weekly and the monthly. This one is from the weekly time frame. Therefore, it takes time to develop. You guys can observe already the projection from November 2021 to November 2022, basically a year of a decline, the bear market, until we found support. And from here on, of course, the projection shifted towards the upside, okay? We're not projecting any lower. I was rather aiming for a higher level, potentially an early parabolic rise. If computing those harmonic ratios, moving now into the third chart, this one was the main idea that we already know at this point is out of the cards, because we achieved the 80,000 at the top. Mid 80s to 90,000 region was the projection back then, early 2023. Okay, at the lows. Why, once again, I'm bringing this chart is to bring the context on the macro to the micro. Why, of course, I'm more neutral at these highs, not rather as bullish as I was before at these lows, rather than being extremely bullish at current levels. So once again, if the other variables at the lows in Bitcoin was presented, I was aiming then rather a parabolic rise indeed from that time on. Okay, also in confluence with a major ABCD. This one was, to me, we presented all of those arguments previously in the prior room where there was some changes or some challenges for the interpretation of the proper market information. Accumulation, in my opinion, was there back then on the macro, potentially for a parabolic rise. You can observe here to 91,000 region as a conservative price point. Okay. Clearly, we violated those levels, but it doesn't mean that the argument for higher levels were indeed presented. And this is where we are currently on the macro. So therefore, to me, everything started on this last cycle, at least, from the FTX saga, the highs to the lows, the sentiment. Once again, many people were calling for lower level, 3,000, and so on. Okay. Along the way, also, throughout my journey, I've encountered many opportunities in the space. Okay, you know what, guys? I'm not gonna go over that point again. I'm going to remove some bad sentiment, but let me be clear that there has been some bad participants or opportunists in the space only to take advantage of what they present as their technical argument. Okay, our work has been extremely from the legends of the past, respecting the technicals. Therefore, I'm not going to go back to bad memories in the past or bad experiences that I have personally in my journey trading cryptocurrencies. Nevertheless, I'm making this comment. Why? Because as of now, we're seeing extremely insane calls only at these highs right, at these highs, but rather, why not at these lows? Why were those participants not making the 150 or 100,000 projection from these lows? Why now here? I mean, it seems obvious, in my opinion, that we can go higher, right? But I'm not personally as bullish as I was at these lows, where, once again, those levels, in my opinion, were true levels of support on the macro. Do not get lost here. Once again, on the macro, we indeed have the major parabolic rise to where 91 was the projection, somewhere around here. Okay, that was indeed the parabolic rise from 2023. Okay, there was indeed a very important pattern identification that started from the highs, FTX saga, back to the lows. Okay, we achieved those levels. From there on, projection to higher levels. And this cycle is the one that we're still in. Okay, now, of course, I led the job for those who can identify the top on this cycle. Okay, my projections were only up until 91. And of course, 100,000 key psychological level becomes pretty much obvious. But conservative higher levels from those lows, only 91,000 for the 1.618, I believe, back at the highs from the 69 to the lows. Let's revisit what those arguments were. I believe this one were 1 to 72 for the ABCD, this one, considering that the C point here between the legs A and C yields a ratio of the 0.786, where its reciprocal ratio is the extension between the legs B to the C at the 1 to 72. You guys can observe here, 1 to 72 was around mid-80s, and potentially the 1.41 where I plotted the 91,000 region. Okay, so now let's bring back the current information, because this is where we are now on BTC, the major parabolic rise. Can we go higher? My friends, at this point, you guys already know all the arguments I presented before are the same. I'm not as euphoric, let's say, from this high rather than we were at these lows. Okay, to me, major opportunities, at least in crypto, were presented back then. We can of course go slightly higher, but in my opinion, these are neutral levels. Okay, to not say bearish. Okay, neutral levels, in my opinion, are levels of indecision. Okay, we have some candlestick patterns on the weekly presenting resistance. So let's move now into the daily time frame. Again, we are going to be presenting what we read on the daily time frame now. On the weekly, of course, the major unfolding events already took place from that low back then. And I invite everyone cordially to check those videos from the same time, 2022, between late 2022 or even 2021, we can have an argument there, to 2023, 2024, to current date, okay? From the other gurus that you guys may be familiar with, okay? Why? Because the projection now are extremely high. The sentiment is calling for higher levels. Of course, we can go higher, but once again, why not making those major macro projections from where the true lows were at these accumulation for a major yield opportunity. If you measure the lows to current highs, let's use the current highs, 585, nearly 589. Is this XRP and the 589 saga? Those who understand the joke may get it. However, after 587%, okay, well, let's go to the all-time high, 112. After 630 and change percent, I'm not as optimistic as I was at the lows, my friend, okay? We are now hyping. You guys know that the sentiment nearly the tops, I would say, nearly the tops. Maybe we are, I do not know. I wish I know, right? but we're acting accordingly now based on the patterns that we perceive on the daily, the 4 hour, and so on. So after a significant upward move of nearly 700 or 635%, I'm not as optimistic at these highs, okay? Once again, I'm not trying to be bearish, neither bull, only presenting that the risk to reward ratio, in my opinion, on the macro, once again, keep this in mind, on the macro was rather presented at these lows. Of course, we can go into another, what I see now, the hyper, ultra, mega cycle on BTC. I heard this before. I know how this story usually culminates, and it's often nearly at the C leg. Nearly at the C leg before we have a C to the D projection that can take a year or so. We will know this, of course, in hindsight by next year or so, I believe. We'll have more information then. We are now June 17th of 2025. Our periods of risk. We're here. But again, I'm not trying to be bearish here. Once again, only want to move accordingly from the macro to the micro, okay? So we are now here. How high, if we're indeed in a major mega bull trend, let's do the analysis here from the macro, okay? Let's remove here. Please keep in mind that we are having an intersection between price and time this tomorrow, actually, on the S&P 500 as well as Bitcoin for Thursday the 19th. Between 18th and the 19th, we're having an intersection between price and time, meaning that a significant move may occur during these dates, okay? So keep attention, or pay attention to those dates, 18th through 19th. I believe we also have the options expiration, or futures are also expiring on Friday the 20th. Will be intriguing to see where we are at the end of the year, I would say, for the last 6 months in the calendar. Okay, so to apply Fibonacci extensions, okay, we're gonna have to apply here the retracement from the previous high on the macro. Once again, my friends, from the macro to the micro, this one starting on the macro, because it's what matters on the bigger lens. We are indeed still pretty much ranging or having an overthrown of the 1.618 at 102. Okay, if we're indeed in a major parabolic rise, the 2.618 in this case is often the last leg of the move, ideally, but the major challenges, of course, are the 1.618 for the golden ratio before heading into the extensions. For the 1.90, the complementary ratio of the 1.618 is a 1.90, okay? So yes, we can argue that this may be a super cycle, mega, ultra, super bullish before achieving the 2.618. That can be always the case. We never know. Anyone claiming to know what is going to happen next is selling you some smoke mirrors, okay? Selling you some cookies. Anyways, once again, I'm not trying to be bearish here, but if I look at the technicals on the macro, does anything else suggest that we may go to the 2.618? Is crypto really the future of finance? Having all these variables in mind that we're observing across the board with the equities and also the true events that are unfolding now with geopolitical turbulences, can this truly be the time for crypto to run? It has been already at the lows, right? But the argument is that if this is indeed the future of finance, will there be an increased interest in crypto? I have a hard time to believe why, because I've been in the space for 10 years in crypto specifically, and I heard this before, my friends. Maybe it's taking time to unfold. will take longer. But every time I hear euphoria, I rather approach the market a little more cautious rather than being extremely optimistic. I do understand, however, why the sentiment may be shifting now towards the AL season, right? If we go into the total three, excluding BTC and Ethereum, I do not know where those same participants were, honestly, from these lows. Basically, a mimic pattern of the same cipher on Bitcoin is printing or was printed also at these lows from, once again, early 2023. Okay, this is a chart, an index for the altcoins. And many altcoins indeed rally. However, I was wondering why many are calling for now an altcoin season. Some of the altcoins was looking at, let's have an example here on VeChain, VED. This one was one of my trading instruments back then, also 2020, 2021, is maybe due to the same arguments that these altcoins did not run majorly or underperform when comparing to other altcoins such as XRP, Ethereum, and so on. I agree. There might be at a lower levels here because they did not have the major run. So maybe that's why, or that can be the reason why participants in the market are expecting an altcoin season. However, keep in mind that many other instruments, such as XRP, have already rallied majorly. Not only XRP, we have Ethereum, we have others also printing major turning points from the lows, okay? Here, a clear example, XRP was at the lows, even last year, most recently, printing also. By the way, XRP is known as the last altcoin to run fashionably late, ideally, before making these parabolic rises, then a range in between until revisiting lower levels. Very peculiar behavior on XRP. Can this be the case again? Are we going to observe a choppy action before heading lower, or we're actually going to see the 589? What does the pattern or the technical suggest in this manner? I know there is a chart about the money supply circulating in the space where, my friends, I only look at the technicals that is printing on any particular instrument. In this case, cryptocurrencies. What does it suggest that we are going to go much higher? Let's say to the 4.23, 242. What other arguments are there in the price action suggesting that we are going to certainly achieve those levels? I particularly do not see those arguments, at least from these highs, my friends. Can we go higher? Sure. But I wouldn't make crazy calls 250, 300,000 and so on. 100,000 is already the golden ratio from the previous high. FTX Saga is why, once again, it's important to bring that chart in mind. FTX Saga to the lows, we are within the 1.618 if we look at the macro. Okay, we're hovering above, slightly above 102, but you guys can observe that these monthly candles represent the session highs of that particular session high back then, 109, and now most recently 112. Can we go any higher, my friends? We will see. I know the space is filled with charlatans making projection at this high. We can always go higher, but again, I rather approach the market when the sentiment is extremely bearish, such as the FTX Saga to the lows. I do remember clearly, vividly, that was indeed the time to be more bullish, in my opinion. Okay? In my particular opinion. Once again, this doesn't represent any financial advice, but rather an interpretation of the technical information for educational purposes only. If you guys have any comment or requests, without me talking too much or being too pessimistic here, don't want to spook anyone, but rather present solid arguments, as is always the case. Let's present solid arguments and not try to scare anyone, okay? Our projections are from an objective manner that comes from the researchers or the researchers of the past 1930s. Basically, when the Fed started, also 1910, that was the time where the trip to Jekyll Island began. And now we're observing that the Fed has indeed influenced the financial system since then. All right, let's go. This is what I like. Shouting. Great to see you here, my friend. Confucius. Hello, buddy. Anderson, Shram. Let's go. Hey, Marvel. I knew you from Market Makers Group. Yes, we were there. That was also one of the biggest challenges because of the sentiment. Clearly, the sentiment from there shifted now. Because remember, the extreme sentiment back then at the lows during that time, not only for BTC, but also for the indices. It was a hard time to challenge the main opinion from, of course, the particular person back then. But again, we're not trying to boil any bad sentiment, but moving accordingly to what we see. Can you do a TA on YFI? Absolutely. Let's go. The next one, shouting Doge. Ooh, the king of memes. Absolutely. Which, by the way, I saw a comment on X that Doge achieved $1 scam week on the Bitbit or Bybit platform. Let's start here with a request with our friend on YFI. Wi-Fi, another Yearn Finance, right? If I remember correctly, that was the name. It's been a long time, my friends. This is why, oof, yeah. Many altcoins, such as this one also, did not run since 2021. Basically, after FTX saga, many did not run. And my question also remains, are these the one that are going to disappear? I honestly am wondering seriously if these altcoins will have another turn such as the 2021. Assuming an example here before jumping into the daily time frame, imagine investing, right, or buying this token on an example, my friends. Okay, this is not to be bearish or bullish or any of those arguments, only an argument. Okay, imagine buying the same levels or this token back in 2020, August 2020. You are basically at the same levels. You hold it, you believe all the speculation, the future of finance. Yes, we rally, momentum was there, euphoria to the peak, the climax, a major nuke, the rug pull that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is known for. And now you're sitting here at the same levels. This, in the case that you did not take any profits, and I'm talking you as a third person, not any particular member here in this chat, okay? And why I know this, because I've been in that same boat. XRP was one of them. I experienced major rallies, major drawdowns, and then I moved into extremely trading, only trading and taking profit, right? Capital growth preservation is basically what matters on any instrument, in my opinion. Okay, so yeah, on the monthly time frame, Wi-Fi is presenting a lower level, the same low since 2020, and this is why, again, I see why the argument of altcoin season may occur. But again, you have to consider that, will these tokens be the one that will just do nothing, and only the true tokens that have utility will perform? Are we at that turning point, inflection point for the scam coins or true tokens that present utility? My friends, this is of course the unknown factor. But yeah, on the macro, Wi-Fi is at the same levels from 2020. Let's move now into the daily time frame to see what other variables we have, because we can always take arguments or take those variables to execute patterns. On daily time frame, you guys can already observe an inflection point also from, let's see, the previous low, February 2025, to current levels. An inflection point, once again, is a curvature where the curve deviates either towards the upside or towards the downside. This can be a significant amount of trading volume that occur in particular in that particular region, even from 2024. So yeah, if we lose these levels, all I can see here is if we apply a proper Fibonacci application on the Fib retracement from this major move from the lows to the highs on the daily, you guys can already observe where my eyes is if the key technical level is lost. The key technical level at 0.618, $5, right? This $5 we can then have the argument for the 0.786 for a cipher or the 0.886 for a shark, only if this zone is lost on the daily. Once again, key inflection point, we are retesting support as of now. As of now, support on Wi-Fi, okay? I'm not being bearish, neither bullish here, only once again presenting the technical arguments. Support at the key technical level from the previous low to the highs. If we break the 0.618, we then have the argument for a cipher. If that's the case, okay, you guys can already connect the data points here for harmonic ratios that yields a 0.786, a 4.6, or the 0.886, a 4.35. Okay, but again, we must violate first the key technical level, given that buyers are defending this key zone. Therefore, the name inflection point. Moving into a 4-hour, we also can observe that this is at a lower level, okay? But once again, we must break the $5 region on Wi-Fi. Is it 5,000 or $5? Seems to be 5,000. Anyways, now on the 4-hour, I don't see anything else other than the key technical level. Basically, looking left, market leaf clues, we're trading at the same levels. I don't see any M formation unless we move into the 4 or the hourly in this case. Seems to be some variation of an M. Like hourly? Let's see. From this segment of the move, anchoring the lows, 499 to the highs. Yeah, not a true pattern. Maybe, arguably, actually, a deep Gartley. I can observe here from these lows to the highs. Ideally, we should anchor this one, but if we're permissive, the proper congregation of ratios lines up here more, considering that this may be a scam wick, which is known in crypto. We can anchor the B point here, the C point at this high, and the PRC previously at the 0.786 and the 0.886 where we're finding some support. Okay, so therefore a deep Gartley, as long as the 0.886, a 5 is not lost. You guys know that a Gartley, a violation of a Gartley often mutates into a crab pattern if, once again, these levels are lost. Therefore, 1.618 will be a deep Gartley, a bullish crab pattern at the 1.618 if, only if we lose this level at the 0.886. I hope this one helped. Only a brief comment on the hourly, the 4-hour, and the macro. The next one for our friend Shouting Doge. Before jumping into Doge, I also read a comment that Bitcoin went to zero on the MEX exchange. Bitcoin. Was it MEX? Maybe not USDT. Let's see. I type Bitcoin, BTC only. BTC, USDT, MEX, this one. Where's this one? From Mexico? I don't know, my friends. Joking. But I remember seeing a chart on BTC that went to zero, basically. Was it on USDT? Let's see, maybe USD only. We have, was it a raise? I do have the chart, in fact, here. I took a picture, snapshot. Need to look at my chart here. Apologies, my friends, only to bring true arguments, okay? As you guys know that I don't like to talk on my elbows, if that makes any sense. Someone can also check that chart on MEX. It went to 0, basically 0 twice. Where's that chart? I can present it on the Discord once I find it. Okay. Tracking here in the background. Where is that chart? I do believe it was on the MEX exchange. Only interesting data points here on Bitcoin. Why did we go to those levels? A glitch? Could be. Or a warning sign. I don't know. All right, Doge. I want to make sure of those. It was on MEX. Unless I'm getting confused here. I believe it was on MEX. In futures. I don't see it here. I don't MEX, but I do have the chart on my Discord server. On the bookmark. Not showing here, unless on the macro. Let's see. Not on the monthly. I don't remember what's on the daily time frame. Basically a 0. I'm gonna find the chart and share it with you guys, okay? Doge. Let's see if that wick remains there. The meme of coins. Doge, the same one. And even has an icon here. You guys saw it. That was not from me. A pop here out of nowhere. Yeah, back then I do remember also presenting the arguments on Doge at this Gartley pattern. Clearly major turning point, but not in the same manner to breaking the previous high. So this is why I do agree, or I understand mainly, not that I agree, but I understand why the sentiment is that we're going to observe an altcoin season. Hard to know, but unfortunately I need to see those variables such as this one, right? Where lower risk on the macro. You can observe here, this is potentially from last year, August even. That was basically when it was presented. And then of course a major turning point of 400%. So yeah, I agree. Many are expecting many altcoins to break the previous high, but doesn't necessarily have to occur. I do not know. Honestly, I do not know if we have to. Indeed, XRP is one of them. What, right? Did we break the previous all-time high? I think we didn't even break. We barely went slightly higher from the Bitstamp on XRP. Or Bitfinex, XRP. 1 second. XRP USD. Bitstamp. Maybe we did. Barely. Right after how many years? 2018. Lows. Spike. As a heartbreak. Or heartbeat. Lows. Accumulation. Spike. And now, are we going to present the same rating here after major turning points? I do not know, my friends. Hopefully this is not an exit liquidity for the whales. But again, I don't want to be bearish here, only presenting my experience in the crypto space. All right, if there is no more requests, this is all I see for now. If you guys have any other question, you guys know where to find us, marbob6.com. That website will link you to our Discord. If you're interested or not, it's up to you. We like to read the variables in the price action from an objective perspective. Everyone, thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. And remember to live a life with an attitude of gratitude, 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 gratitude.